Welcome back. You're watching the Power Breakfast Show. Now, 87 people were this past weekend killed in Burundi in a crisis that looks like it's not about to end soon. 79 were called the enemies of the state, quote-unquote, and want to have that talk about the crisis in Burundi this morning. We're joined by Ambassador Ismail Shanti, the Director of the East African Standby Force. A very good morning to you, sir. We're joined by Honorable Richard Onyonkai, the Member of Parliament of Kitutu Chache constituency. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming. And finally, we have Colonel Peter Kalimba. He's also with the East African Standby Force, Head of Administration. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. And maybe the first question is to you, Ambassador. For those who do not know what the East African Standby Force, kindly tell us who this is.
Thank you very much for welcoming us in this session. We feel humbled to be here. ESF is East African Standby Force, is part of the East African Standby Force as a whole. The idea came, as you know, from the head of state of African Union, who met in Durban in 2002, and have decided to come with African solutions for African problems. This is the start. This wonderful vision was later translated into the new peace and security architecture, we called APSA, which gave programs, and then African Union made available roadmaps 1, 2, and 3, roadmaps to guide the force to be fully prepared and developed in a way that it is ready to deploy in order to promote peace and security within the region, within African continent. ESF was created as part of the African Standby Force in 2004 and was in the making for the last 10 years under the APSA program in the spirit and the letter, and through the guidance of the roadmaps R1 and 2 and 3 of African Union, we have been able to move with the force to attain what we call the initial operational capability. In 2010, after conducting successfully major exercises, we call them command post exercise. We have log mapex, field training exercises, and then we later moved with the initial operational capability. We had to move so that we meet the deadline, which was set to be December 2015, to have the force fully ready to deploy. We are talking about a force of a multinational force of military, police, and civilian, fully integrated, ready to deploy. The force is now ready to deploy. Okay, the force is now ready. Yeah, because the next question was going to be, what missions have you taken part in as ESF? ESF has had to, the idea is to have a force ready to deploy. Yes. So we were in the making for the last 10 years. Yes. We could not have taken major deployments without being ready. So we have to be ready first, and then be ready, and then be mandated to deploy. Okay. If we have to deploy the force, we need to be mandated by the owner of the force, which is the African Union. This is the force of African Union, under leadership of African Union, with a mandating process that has to be used the procedures for us to deploy. So we are ready since December 2014, ahead of schedule. But to deploy the force, if the need is there for the force to be deployed, we need to be mandated for by the authority, which is African Union. All right. So now let's go into the talks on Burundi. And Colonel Peter, just for our viewers who might not be understanding what exactly or why exactly Burundi is going through what it's going through, kindly just bring us up to speed with that.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. The issue of Burundi, I think, for the last couple of months, they have had a problem in regard to the third term by the incumbent president, and definitely the crisis had to erupt. And since that time, both East African Community, African Union, United Nations are seized of the situation. They have been trying to encourage. We are in a phase of conflict prevention, to encourage mediation, negotiation, and mediation, which you know very well, that was entrusted with His Excellency the President of Uganda. So we are encouraging inclusive dialogue, which is the phase we are in. Like the ambassador told you, the Eastern Africa Standby Force was established in 2004 to provide a standby capability for rapid and preventive deployment in accordance with the Constitutive Act of the African Union. So up until now, the force is ready, as it tells you, but we give peace a chance for the dialogue to take place between the incumbent and the opposition.
All right, Honorable Onyonka, the EAC has, been very vocal in calling for an end to this crisis. President Kenyatta even, asking for the elections to be delayed earlier on in the year. But it looks like the call fell on deaf ears. Why do you think this is so?
I think to a large extent, African leadership, especially, let me say, the East African community leaders, were raising issues about the elections in Burundi, but the reality is, what is the position we have on the ground? Museveni is going for, I think, his 5th term. President Kagame is already changing the constitution to go for his third term or something like that.
Joseph Kabila as well.
Kabila wants the same thing. So the reality you have on the ground is that what Nkurunziza did, according to those people who have been working with him, was within the parameters of the Burundi constitution, where he felt that his 3rd term, which everybody accuses him of what he did by going for elections for the 3rd term. According to him, it was taken to court. The court interpreted it to mean that the 1st term he served, he was actually selected. He was not elected by universal suffrage. And after that, the problems have come. The reality is, the East African leadership, President Uhuru, President Kagame, Museveni, and all of them must make sure that Burundi does not collapse as a state. And they must be honest and sincere with each other. I think Kagame has issues with the Burundi government for the simple reason that he's been making allegations that the Interahamwe is being supported by the Burundi government. The Burundi government believes that Kagame is taking insurgents and training them who have gone into Burundi as refugees. And in this case, the Burundi government feels that it's the Tutsi who are being trained to come and remove him from power. You have the same issue in Eastern Congo, where Kabila feels that because Kagame accuses him of having shielded the Interahamwe to try and remove Kagame. So you can't look at the Burundi issue singly and remove it from the larger context of the Great Lakes region and the geopolitical understanding of the East African context. So the African leadership must deliberately make sure that their negotiations, they must be honest. The truth about Burundi is that you have the Hutus, who are the majority community, you have the Tutsis, who are the minority. The same replica happens to be in Rwanda. Unless we deal with the complex issues of what do you do with two communities, which one is a minority and one is a majority, and provide constitutional protections for both sides, then you will not solve the problem.
There's argument that the roots of the current violence are more political and not ethnic, so there can be hope that the crisis, though still very disturbing, is tractable. Do you think that, or your thoughts are still that?
I will tell you today, anybody will lie to you if the problem in Burundi is not tribal. In Africa, we have two issues. It is either political or tribal. In America, it's either racial or political. Our position in Africa is that you take a community that is a majority, which usually violates the rights of the minority with impunity, and those rights are not protected. But at the same time, you must look at the majority and understand the historical context under which this community, which is the majority, has been in power. Africans forget very quickly, Burundi has been one country where no head of state until Nkurunziza has ever ruled more than 2 years. They have either been removed by a coup, assassinated, sent into exile from the 50s, from the 40s. So the reality is that you must look at Burundi from its context. And since Nkurunziza came into power, he has maintained some semblance of peace and security, whereby he has actually ruled for 10 years for the first time. But there are complaints that he's not been managing and taking care of the interests of the minority, who happen to be the Tutsi. And yet they had what they call the Arusha Accord, which was signed by President Nyerere. The Arusha Accord had certain constitutional protections for the Tutsi, whereby the Hutu will take 60% of whatever positions in government, formation of the cabinet, military positions, and the Tutsis would keep 40%. Right now, there are Tutsis who feel that agreement is actually inconsequential.
Yes.
They feel that their rights have been violated. They feel like, yes, the Hutus have been lording over them, and something needs to be done. So there must be a deliberate attempt to solve the problems in Burundi genuinely and sincerely, and it should start with the East African leadership.
East African leadership, which we have discussed and seen that there are certain interests that maybe prevent you know, the East African leadership from going in. But Ambassador, many feel that as much as the AU has condemned these attacks, they really haven't done much. You know, your take on this?
I think that African Union has taken good position, good leadership of the process. They are from the start committed with the prevention mechanism. We were talking about dialogue, mediation. They're still on mediation. They believe on mediation. They have committed the support of the United Nations with the larger international community, including the Eastern African community. They have taken leadership in the hope that things will be good for the better. We now take note that the situation is still dire. We still hope that a political solution can be achieved. This is the belief of the African Union, the belief of all of us. We hope that we don't have to immediately use the force, because the force is meant to be the last resort. If you use the force, that means that you have failed from all options. We have 6 scenarios. We have to move from 1 to 5 to 6. The force being used means that we have all failed in the other elements of the process.
Is then at what point, what is the time reference? What is the time?
If I can recall what has been taken as a resolution from the United Nations, approved by the Peace Security Council of the African Union, they have taken note of the situation, the way it is moving. We are facing some escalation of the situation. They have said that we have now to prepare for a contingency plan, just in case we have failed with the mediation process, and be able to take action so that we save lives, we save the civilians, we protect the properties, the lives of the citizens, and we protect the state of the nation of Burundi. These are part of but they still have maintained the mediation process to be on. If I recall the press release from Dr. Zuma from the African Commission back 2 days back or 3 days back, they condemn what is now the escalation of violence within the grounds. We are informed of what is now unfortunately happening, but they still call for inclusive dialogue for all parties. This goes to the interest of the whole the country as a whole, all parties included. So they are still calling for appealing for maximum understanding of what should be a national dialogue for the interest of Burundi, for the interest of all the whole region. So they are calling for that, but they don't. They're also taking steps in terms so that we prepare for contingency plan just in case we are unfortunately failed. God forbid.
Forced to go in there.
There's an issue I wanted to raise. The reason why many people feel that the East African region leadership has not taken the initiative to make sure that the Burundi issue is given the urgency at which the problems that are coming up for them to be solved is, number one, you can see they have about 3 to 4 initiatives discussing Burundi. You have one in the EU where people are going to Brussels, meeting there, nobody knows what exactly they're discussing. You have one which is being sponsored by the ACP, the African, Caribbean, Pacific countries. You have another one where the East African community has given President Museveni the mandate, who has appointed a special envoy to go to Burundi to try and negotiate. My feeling, and many of the people who are observing Burundi are saying, let us collapse all these initiatives to one, so that you have one initiative which is known with critical and important peace builders who can then descend on Burundi, where, for example, the Council of Ministers from the East African region have never met on Burundi. And when they meet, you have different positions from different countries. What Minister Mina talks is different from what Mbabazi talks. I mean, sorry, the foreign minister of Uganda talks. It is different from what the foreign minister of Ethiopia talks. So the position should be that let us look at Burundi with the urgency it requires. Let us make sure we have one initiative discussing the peace and security issues which have come up, and let us make sure that we bring all the Burundi people to the sitting table. As you start telling Nkurunziza that yes, even the elections, if they were not legitimate, or whatever arguments you're making about it, the truth is, create an environment whereby the people of Burundi can start discussing and negotiating with him for a new constitution, for him to make sure there's peace and security, fairness in many of for example, the soldiers who are arrested after the coup should be treated fairly and reasonably, and create an avenue where there is dialogue which will then solve the very genuine and sincere issues which both sides have in Burundi.
I see Colonel Peter nodding his head. Do you agree with what Honorable Onyenka is saying, that there are too many bodies trying to deal with this Burundi crisis? We just need to make sure all of them are collapse and then build one solid one. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with him. First of all, regarding your question of what role African Union is playing, African Union has right now a fact-finding investigators in the country.
On the ground, yes.
Yes. Slightly above 50. They give information. Theirs is to deal with the issues of human rights violations. And this report is fed to Eastern Africa and by force. We share. As the ambassador tells you, we have already had a directive from the African Union to prepare a contingency plan in the case of any eventuality and failure of this ongoing dialogue. But at the end of the day, I agree with the Honorable that actually the solution of Burundians will come from Burundians themselves.
Well, and still on the African Union, there are reports that say that the role that Burundi plays in the Somalia crisis, and that is of supplying 5,000 troops on behalf of the AU, could be a reason as to why the AU is not as, don't say active or engaging, but as not in there quite deep. What are your thoughts? And I'll start with you, Ambassador, in regard to that.
That may be a judgment, but we are dealing with political issues, political interests. This is a huge political situation, so somebody can have his view. But I do believe, and again, that African Union has taken good leadership of the process. We probably have to agree with the Honorable here for calling for inclusive dialogue, maybe ensure that we all agree on the table to take decision on how to solve the problem. Probably this may be a way, but I don't believe that Africans have failed because of anything of this kind. They are really committed. We have to commend them. They have taken decision, have taken commitment, they have more showed dedication of the cases, because they believe that the situation should not go to the deployment of a force, because it means that we have faith. We have good capacity enough to move with the peacemaking process, prevent conflict prevention, which is now on. We hope that this can lead, and actually the United Nations also is convinced that we can move for inclusive dialogue, for mediation process, for resolving the crisis through a political dialogue, which is the way. And unfortunately, if we have failed, then we may have to use the force, which is the last resort.
My honest observation is that, to me, the argument which is being fostered out there, that number one, you have to have regime change in Burundi for you to solve the problem in Burundi, does not hold. The truth and the reality is, we must never forget that 80% of the population, even though, okay, let me be fair and say maybe 70% of the population actually supports President Nkurunziza. But that doesn't mean that the minority Burundians who exist must not be protected and their interests taken care of. And to be very sincere, it should be the responsibility of the AU to make sure that before you can send the East African Standby Force into Burundi, you must make sure you have exploited all the diplomatic avenues and channels which exist to make sure that a political solution is found in Burundi. Because even if you send the force into Burundi, the reality is that finally people have to talk. And I feel that the Burundians are willing to talk. I feel that if people stop talking, the reality is they start fighting. So before people can start fighting, let the Burundians be encouraged to talk, to discuss, and for the first time, let the Burundi question be dealt with sincerity, with openness, so that the critical issues which people, the fears that the minorities have and the fears which the majority have, are dealt with legitimately and genuinely.
A lot of people are also feeling very disappointed by both state and non-state actors from the international scene, saying, you know what, you're not doing anything for us, yet you pretend to be deeply concerned about the African continent. Here is Burundi that is going through a very serious crisis. Colonel Peter, why do you think this is so, that the international community, as much as it is condemning the attacks, are not being able to come in with a strong foot?
Well, as I earlier told you, I start with the African Union. The issue of the Burundi peacekeepers in Somalia, this force went in Somalia way back in 2007. It has nothing to do with the issue of Burundi, which erupted in April this year. So that one has nothing to do. I just want to believe that there is a process, and the ongoing process is conflict prevention, which is defined by negotiations, dialogue, and mediation. So once this thing is exhausted, either from the African Union perspective or United Nations, then there is a provision for a peace mission as the last resort. But definitely a chance for internal inclusive dialogue is given a chance until it is exhausted.
So for now we are promoting internal dialogue from the Burundians themselves, as they will be the only ones to see themselves out. Fatou Bensouda of the ICC had threatened to go into Burundi to investigate the war crimes. Do you think this will help, Honorable Onyansa?
I think for me, the truth is the ICC is always open to move into any country where they feel rights have been violated by the citizens of that country. And the truth is the atrocities being committed in Burundi are committed by both sides. You have Hutus who have been killed and Tutsis vice versa. Some people have tried to suggest that it looks like there is a deliberate, calculated, organized system which has been set up in place by the Burundian government to try and kill many Burundians because of this conflict. My position is, yes, the ICC has a right to move in and do investigations as to what has happened in Burundi if there are any violations. But the position of many observers is that before you can escalate the issue in Burundi by saying you're going to have sanctions instituted on the leadership and many other people whom you find to be violating those rights, if you feel that the ICC is going to start investigating individuals so that they can be taken to The Hague for prosecution and everything, you also must be fair and you must do thorough investigations. You can see from the Kenyan case, issues which have come up about whether Bensouda and the prosecutor before her had done a thorough investigation to bring culprits into book. My feeling and many people's feeling is that you must handle Burundi with care. You must involve African leadership to try and encourage the Burundi leadership currently to accept to a negotiated settlement to the issues which are taking place in Burundi. But there's much more that Bensouda can do in Syria and in Iraq and other places before she can rush into Burundi. That does not mean that you cannot investigate Burundi.
And I want to hear your thoughts, Ambassador, but just to pick on something you said, Honorable, you said something about the African leadership coming together to ensure that, this crisis in Burundi is maintained, is solved. But at the same time, we have just agreed that African leaders are also being, in a way, selfish.
Yes, it is, but in a way you may say that, but I'd rather take the opposite view, that I think African leadership, if you look at us, Museveni is having elections coming. I don't think he has time to think about Burundi. Kagame is on his referendum trying to have a third term. Magufuli has just finished his elections. I think he's trying to get his feet wet I think you see President Uhuru has been running from WTO to the Eurobond to other issues. I think to a large extent the East African leaders need to figure out that even when they have weighty issues they are dealing in their domestic political establishment, we now need to start looking at Burundi as a very complex issue, and it has to be handled with emergency. Nobody has been talking about Burundi. I'm sure this is the first group of people who have come to the media to discuss Burundi, and I think we need to run with haste. Kenya has diplomats. We have Ambassador Mwita, we have Ambassador Vitisia. They are all over the place running. I know that President Uhuru has been working with soft diplomacy. He's the one who has been encouraging the opposition leader, the major opposition leader in Burundi, Mr. Rwasa, to join government. Uhuru wants Burundi to have a government of national unity. For me, that is a wonderful thing. He needs now to put more effort and energy to make sure that he can even take the Burundi negotiations and ask Museveni to allow him to proceed with this negotiated settlement. All right. Ambassador, your views on Fatou Bensouda threatening to go into Burundi to investigate? I
concur with the analysis given by the Honorable here. I don't have much to add on this one. But again, regarding the commitment of our head of states, of our nations, in the issue of Burundi, I want to believe that while they are having the national issues within hand, they are really committed to find a solution on Burundi. We should commend what they have done so far and probably request more involvement in the process. But they have shown that they are really there. They have not lost time. They have immediately reacted. If I refer to the Eastern Africa community, they have immediately responded to cases. They have had two summits to see the situation in Burundi, and they have immediately moved with the decision to commit. President Museveni is there since the start. He's in the process. He may have elections, but I want to believe that he is still committed in the process. Because whatever, if you can succeed in your nation, but if the neighborhood is not safe, you are not safe. So they understand that more than we do ourselves. True. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. On the issue of Fatou Bensouda of the ICC, I think the warnings she has issued is very good. It is in the direction of the deterrence of any human rights violations and any other abuses that are being committed to the Burundian people on whichever side. But at the end of the day, it is the region, East African community, like the Honorable says, which can spare a little time, which understands the root causes of the problems of that country, that can probably give leverage and some efforts towards solving the problem of Burundians than Bensouda herself. And my next question is to you, and that's on the humanitarian crisis. The UN says about 100,000 people have fled to other countries, with Tanzania having the highest number of refugees. This then becomes a burden, quote unquote, to the host nation. Some parts of Tanzania have recorded outbreaks of cholera due to the high number of people who are going into the country. Your take, how should we handle this scenario? Well, Tanzania, like any other neighboring country, including Rwanda and even DRC, have had that burden of taking over the refugees from Burundi. That is what a regional country can do. There is nothing better than that one, by taking over the refugees. And these are spillover problems that not only affected the country, but even the neighboring countries. The issue of the cholera, indeed, it was reported, and a number of people lost their lives. But ICRC intervened, and since 4 months ago, the problem has been now contained. Yeah. All right, there is no other thing than what the current neighboring countries can do than hosting the refugees from a neighboring country which is on fire.
Same thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, the only small maybe addendum I would bring is the fact that I think that other than African countries believing in UNHCR and International Red Cross and all these other the Refugee International, all these other non-state actors to come and solve the problem of the refugee crisis in Burundi, my honest observation is that let African countries have a summit, have a meeting, let us make sure that we are able to raise money from our states, even when many of us may not be doing very well, and make sure that this money then is either given to local non-state actors to try and create an environment whereby the Burundian refugees are provided with an environment which is healthy, which is comfortable for them to survive until when the crisis can be found in their country.
Okay. Now, earlier on you said, you talked about the main opposition leader who in July asked for the formation of a national unity government. Do you think this would end the crisis if, you know, Pierre Nkurunziza and his team sat down together with Rwasa and said, okay, fine?
The truth about African leadership is that usually what we fight for, other than the ideological issues which may not be there, is political power. And then which cascades down to economic power, then which cascades down to benefits and privileges. If you remember our case in 2007 and 2008 in Kenya, the truth is we were able, Kofi Annan was able to negotiate with Kenya by simply coming up with a suggestion that he felt, and many of the eminent persons felt, that political power in Kenya could be shared. Therefore, as a result, we ended up having a coalition government. Because of that coalition government, then you had us, in fact, negotiating to have a new constitution, which then led us to having new elections, even with our challenges. To a large extent, the roadmap worked. There is a possibility that in a country like Burundi, you can actually negotiate for a coalition government which becomes all-inclusive and then provides a roadmap whereby the people of Burundi can now begin to discuss, when some of them who are in the opposition are actually in government, so that the negotiations look genuine and sincere to both sides. And then I believe they can come up with a new constitution, and they can agree that by the next elections they would have a roadmap which is going to make sure that Burundi becomes a peaceful and prosperous nation within the East African region. All
right, and I have an SMS here from one of our viewers who says, why in the first place did Nkurunziza change the constitution to favor him? He is the cause of everything. Does it mean without his regime Burundi won't exist? The heads of states in Africa have the negative perception that they are the ones to lead forever. He could have left office when his time was up. That's one of the viewers.
I will answer that. There is a fallacy that we seem to have as as commentators and people who ask the questions, that you think if Nkurunziza was not running for elections, then Burundi would be peaceful. That is a fallacy. That if Museveni hadn't changed his constitution, then he wouldn't be in power, and Uganda would be wonderful. That is not the case. The reality that you have, the circumstances which led to Nkurunziza having a third term, I may not understand as a Kenyan, but as an observer, the circumstances which led him to have this matter discussed in court, where court ruled that he could actually proceed to have a third term, is a matter which historians will sit to discuss. Should Nkurunziza make sure that Burundi becomes a country which can move on without him in the future, my honest observation is that is his responsibility. But as we have said, it is happening in Rwanda. Kagame is changing the constitution. If you have issues in Rwanda by 2017 and you have insurgents who are blowing up the streets of Kigali, would then that mean that Kagame didn't follow the normal constitutional or local mechanisms for him to stay in power? I don't think I have the capacity to analyze that. But my honest observation is, it is true that Africans need to begin to think and own up by making sure that somebody, if the constitution says serve 2 terms, so be it, you can serve 2 terms. And
my next question is to you, and you're a politician, and African voters are increasingly getting upset and getting tired over the president's decisions for securing 3rd terms. What role do you think African voters have to play in ensuring that, you know, democracy wins?
If I speak as a Kenyan politician, the truth is, for me, I do not think that having a 3rd term is really an issue. Let me talk about Kenya or in Africa. In Africa, if you had a good president who serves these people, make sure the economy is running right, make sure he employs and provides opportunities for his people across the board without any favoritism, without any criticism, and make sure that the government that is running is open, transparent, and is respected, you would be shocked that the public will say, let him continue.
True.
People only want the third term to be enforced and enhanced for the simple, I mean the second, for one to have a term limit, to be enforced and enhanced simply because African governance and African leaders govern badly.
Have disappointed us.
Yes, they have disappointed us. So my honest observation is the public is right. If a president is not performing well and a president is not observing democratic principles, a president is employing people without merit but on political expediency, his people are going to be angry. His people are not going to expect him to continue. But I am also knowledgeable, and I'm also my mind is very clear that the fact that you change somebody after 2 terms does not mean that the person who's going to come will actually improve on the leadership that you're going to have. So this is a matter that Africans are going to discuss frequently and are engaged in right now. But the fact is, if your constitution says let a head of state finish 2 terms and get out of office, let it be so.
Let it be so.
Let it be so.
Ambassador, your final words, seeing as we're coming to the end of the program. We've talked about solutions, it being negotiation and mediation. Anything else you can add?
Yes, I just want to thank you again very much for welcoming us here today for the first time. My view is that the solution will come through inclusive dialogue. If we have inclusive dialogue, we'll have through the dialogue the solution for the problem in Burundi. And whenever we have a problem, if dialogue can be there, we'll definitely come out with a solution.
Okay.
This is the best way to discuss. As we sit together, we discuss, we view the situation, the interests. We definitely come, at the end of the day, we come to approve a way forward.
No need to use force until...
The force will be used as a very last resort if we're afraid. Because when you use a force, it's not the implications are very high.
Yeah, true.
And we are not really giving a very good image of what we are as leaders of Africa if we simply have to use the force. The best way to advocate our leadership is to show that we can resolve our problems through dialogue, inclusive as possible.
Okay. Colonel Peter, as we're coming to the end, your final words?
Yeah, thank you very much. I didn't want to repeat what I said. The issue of Burundians would be solved by Burundians themselves. For the issue of the slogan of the African solutions to African problems, indeed, we appreciate the role of the regional member states, the neighboring countries, like hosting the refugees and any other effort to encourage the Burundi people to come to a dialogue for a lasting solution.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this morning and for that conversation. And we'll continue praying for Burundi. Hopefully, an agreement will be reached sooner rather than later. You're watching the Power Breakfast Show. Now hand you over to the band. We'll be right back. Good morning.